Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. Sam's day was scheduled literally by the minutes. In the morning, checking and signing documents, reviewing mail reports, preparing the necessary documentation for the meetings. On top of that, there was a lot of unplanned routine work. Many things he could double-check with the deputy, but as the owner of one of the well-known banks in the city, he was used to keep everything under control from the very beginning of his activity. Life experience told him that once you rely on someone, something was bound to go wrong. Even going on business trips or very rarely on vacation, Sam always had his hand on the pulse. Mornings on such days began the same way. Except not within the walls of the bank, but in the places where he was at the time. The subordinates were already used to the fact that even if the boss was out of the office, he could at any time demand the necessary documents or any report. If everything in the bank was fine, tuned and worked like clockwork. In his personal life, things were not going the way Sam wanted them to. Remembering what was going on at home, sighed sorrowfully and decided to have a coffee in the break between meetings, asked his secretary Joe for it. His favorite strong espresso allowed him to cheer up and forget about the bad stuff, which he was going to do in a few minutes. Joe brought the drink and picked up the documents the director had signed. Just as she walked out of the office, Sam's phone rang. Seeing who the call was from, the man seemed to wonder if it was even worth picking up the phone. After taking a few sips of his drink, he nevertheless decided to answer, realizing that the spouse who had called would not simply settle down. They had been married for only 3 months. But that was enough time for this sweet, gentle girl had turned into a spoiled, scandalous bitch. Life together was not a success. And that very day, leaving, he gave the order to the guards to throw her and her belongings out of his house back where she came from. He had good reasons for that, and he was disgusted to even think about it. But it all started quite promising. The banker met his future wife at one of the receptions held by the city administration for local entrepreneurs and businessmen. He generally did not like such events, but his deputy Alex simply insisted on their appearance. There, when he saw the invitation cards and learned that Sam was not going to go to the banquet, he said indignantly, "Don't you realize what important and necessary people are hosting this reception? I think you wanted to open a couple more branches of our bank in town. Now, I heard that the administration has a lucrative offer, but they're not for everybody." He winked like a conspirator, and Sam decided once again to listen to his friend. After all these years he had always had the right sense of the profitable moves in their business. The evening was very pompous, with a lavishly set table and above native waiters. It was clear the audience had gathered exclusively of a certain circle. The men were all in formal suits. The women shone with jewelry, with expensive stones and outfits that could to outshine the stars at the Cannes Festival. Some of the beauties were clearly invited and served as a certain ornament to this banquet. "Look how the blonde at the window is devouring you with her eyes," whispered Dan. He was a womanizer, having a wife and 2 sons. Dan never missed an opportunity to have an affair on the side, which Sam didn't like at all. He even tried several times to talk to his friend about it, but he just guffawed. "Come on, Sam. A good affair strengthens a marriage. I only love my wife, and this is just a hobby." Sam realized that it was useless. Decided that he just had to figure out his own life and never came back to the subject. At that banquet, Sam did look in the blonde's direction. The girl was undeniably charming. Long curly curls fell over her shoulders. Huge brown eyes framed by long, thick lashes seemed to be bottomless. When she caught his gaze, she looked as if she were embarrassed and blushed. I must say, it looked very natural. Sam understood her age, and the lady was clearly much younger than him. It wasn't hard to look attractive. Young, fresh. The main trump card of such beauties is the thought of a woman's attractiveness, Dan interrupted, carried away to some gentleman they needed for their business. After a while, Sam had already forgotten about the charming blonde. But the girl seemed to have other plans for him. Over the course of the evening, she supposedly happened to be next to him several times. After a while, Sam did not even remember how their acquaintance began. But by the end of the banquet, he already knew that Linda, as the girl's name, was a model of one of the many agencies. They spent the whole evening talking on completely different topics. And the companion turned out to be very well read. He had always thought that such girls had only thoughts about where to go and what to buy. Being well-mannered, Sam offered Linda a ride home after the banquet, and she happily agreed. On the way, the girl wondered what he liked, talked about his hobbies. When we drove up to her house, apparently realizing that the banker might just leave without offering to meet again, she suddenly asked Sam, "Since we now know each other, maybe I can come up to your bank and you advise me on banking products. My grandmother is going to leave me a sum. That's what I'd like to invest. The other banks only offer what's good for them, not me. I trust you." At this point, she smiled so charmingly that Sam could not refuse and left his business card and offered to call. The girl was persistent and literally pushed through her goal. The very next day, Sam got a call or a personal voice. "Good afternoon, Sam. This is Linda. We met yesterday at the banquet. Do you have a minute for me?" It was lunchtime, and Sam decided it would be better to make an appointment at a nearby cafe rather than the bank. The girl, not even hiding her joy, immediately agreed. Linda was an angel at this meeting. Mila is cultured. Sam did not even have time to realize how quickly found himself in the net of this hunter's charms. But, as it turned out later, only for his money. For 6 months, she patiently and persistently pursued her goal to marry a wealthy businessman as soon as possible. And she succeeded. The wedding was in one of the most expensive restaurants. The dress was ordered from Milan. The bride's shoes were chosen from catalogs of the German masters. She immediately took the preparations for the celebration into her own hands and went all out. Sam had absolutely no time to deal with all this fuss. Yes, the bride did not need his help, or rather she needed only material assistance, and she knew how to spend the money herself. Later, Sam was grateful to his lawyer, who persuaded him to find time to conclude a prenuptial agreement. At the time, he had no idea how soon that document would come in handy. A happy married life could only be described as 10 days of the honeymoon. On an island in a hot country, there the young wife gave around her husband, not living in the sun and affectionately asking anything she wanted. It was there that Sam thought he had finally met the love of his life, but immediately upon his return, it was as if his wife had been replaced. She became a completely different person. She began to get annoyed with everything at home, especially the presence of Sam. They began to communicate less and less. And from the outside, it might have seemed as if they were complete strangers, forced to live under the same roof. All Sam's rosy dreams of a happy family life, of a caring fiancé, of quiet, cozy evenings by the fireplace disappeared. Instead, when Sam returned from work, his wife pretended to be asleep, though he saw a light burning in the house as he drove up. A month or so later, Linda was constantly disappearing, and sometimes even returning before 00. To all of his questions, she brushed him off and said she was spending time with her girlfriends. But one day, going on a business trip, he forgot important documents at home and returned very untimely. His wife was chatting cheerfully with someone on the phone. "You have no idea what Robert is like in bed. It's a fairy tale of feelings and emotions. My old man probably wasn't capable of that even when he was young. If he had his money, I'd be the happiest woman with Robert right now. I'd have to keep getting out of this, just so my husband wouldn't think of anything." Then she saw Sam standing on the doorstep and immediately hung up and said in an angelic voice, "You have long been here. Do not think anything. I was just telling my friend a dream." She went on talking such nonsense that it was disgusting to even hear Sam. He took the papers, slammed the door, and left. Sam was already pretty sure that his wife was cheating on him. And this is only a few months after the wedding, but still decided to hire a detective. Did it not so much to be convinced of the betrayal of his wife, but to get confirmation necessary to comply with the marriage contract. Sam had already understood the nature of his beloved, and felt that otherwise he could not avoid the problems and scandals of a divorce. According to the terms of the contract, in case she is unfaithful, she must leave his house with what she came in with. A few days later, Sam returned from a business trip, and there was already waiting for him a package of documents from the detective. The wife rushed to her lover on the first day and spent all those days with him, proof of which was a stack of photos and a few videos on a flash drive. Sam, without thinking twice, filed for divorce his wife. He said, "I'm not going to work things out, and I've already filed the papers. You have time while I'm at work to pack up and get out of my house and life. By the way, the guard will make sure you don't take anything unnecessary by any chance. If you remember, under the terms of the prenup, you have to leave with what you came with. And that's one suitcase. I even let you take the trinkets and rags I bought with my money." Having said that, he immediately got in his car and drove off. There was no regret at that moment. I guess there was only a little sad that it happened to him. He wanted only one thing: for his wife, proven to be unfaithful, to leave quietly without a scandal, but apparently that was not her option. She had absolutely no intention of giving up her hard-won position as the wife of a famous banker, and now she called to inform him about it. As soon as Sam picked up the phone, he immediately regretted it 100 times. The ex was squealing and swearing, so she had to move the machine away. She called out as much as she could and finally burst out, "You're gonna beg me on your knees to come back. I'll think about it. I only married your old man for money. Is that the kind of husband I want?" Sam did not listen to this nonsense and hung up. The old man, as this hysterical woman put it, was really 20 years older than her, but could give a head start to any of her peers. A stately 6 feet tall, with a perfect figure, he still aroused the interest of young ladies. And these were admiring glances, not at his purse, but at him as a man. Despite his busy schedule, he regularly went to the gym and tried to look after himself. After the conversation, if you could even call it a conversation with his wife, Sam wondered how quickly time flies. He was already called an old man. But as if yesterday he was sitting in his village, in the barn, and vigorously reading books. Then, as a child, he loved this secret place where no one could disturb him. And as soon as he managed to get somewhere a new book, he tried to finish reading to the end and quickly. He read a lot and everything in a row. The local library had no novelties for him, so he begged fellow villagers for literature from the old stock. Sam, as if he was transported to that distant time, and immediately heard his mother's voice. "Sam, where are you hiding again? I'm going to find you. You must have got a book somewhere again, right? Mother has to feed the chickens. The manure hasn't been removed from the barn yet. Oh, if you get in my bedroom, I'll burn all your waste paper." That's what she called all the books she found at home. Sam knew in his heart that his mother wouldn't do that. After all, he was given books to read, which meant he had to pay for them. So he kept asking his neighbors for books and reading for hours on end, page after page. Reading is reading, but he tried to do his duty. He had the not so pleasant job of cleaning up the manure for the only cow, and he tried to put it off until last, as if hoping it would do itself. Besides helping his mother with the household, which they had plenty of chickens, geese, a couple of turkeys, and a cow. Sam adored learning. New knowledge beckoned to him, and he brought only excellent marks in almost all subjects. The teachers couldn't get enough of the boy. He was just a helping hand in all quizzes and competitions, no matter what subject they were in. But my mother was not very enthusiastic about it. She always kept saying the same thing: "You can't put your books and knowledge on bread. In the village, it's the hands that matter, not the head. You're the only one who can help me. So let's not slack off. I'm trying for you, so you don't need anything. Sam understood his mother really needed his help because they lived together and she managed not only to look after the household, but also to work. Sometimes his craving for books was stronger. And when he read too much, he forgot all about his duties, for which of course he got a scolding later. Every time he came out of his next hiding place, his mother would read bitterly, "What is the trouble with these books?" "I'm breaking into a board so that my son did not need anything." And he, instead of helping his mother to read a book. All children are like children. There's your friends helping their mothers, and then 12, 0 in front of them playing soccer. And you will not be found because of this paper. Sam listened silently to his mother's reproaches, and in his heart he was dreaming to grow up quickly and become rich. Almost everyone in the village, and sometimes those living nearby, knew about this dream of his. Grandpa Taylor joked that Sam would become a millionaire too. "And what oil or gold you will trade, you will oil or gold you will trade. You will also buy something for my old friendship." But Sam only pressed his lips and turned away from the detractors and whispered to himself, "So what? Laugh, laugh, laugh." At times like that, he was more offended that his father was not around. He'd be sure to put that naughty grandfather to rest in no time at all. His father had been gone for years, but somehow he felt that if he had been around, things would have been different. And for sure, he would have believed in Sam's dream of becoming rich. Gorge, the boy's father, had always tried to take every job he could to provide for his family. It is true that at that time they lived, not rich, but very well off. His mother did not work, but only took care of the house and the household. That time in Sam's memory was associated with the delicious aromas in the house. We often roasted and baked something. Sam thought apple pies were a particular favorite. He seemed to be able to eat them every day in unlimited quantities. The parents lived very amicably, never quarreled. But their happiness ended abruptly. Everything was spoiled by some Sabbath. Sam had not yet understood who the Sabbath was. For some reason, he thought it was a living creature because his mother was going wailing. "Don't go there, Gorge. It will ruin you, this coven." As he grew older, Sam found out why his daddy died. He had gone felling alone without his partner, who was ill. It was the New Year's Eve, and he decided not to give up the extra income. To all his mother's entreaties not to go to his shift that day, he only reassured me, "There's work for an hour or so before you turn around and I'll be back. So ready for dinner and wait, my love." He kissed his wife and son one last time, not even knowing that it would be a goodbye kiss. Gorge did not return for lunch or dinner. Then Sam's mother sounded the alarm. She ran around the village and the neighboring men decided to go in the morning to look for her. That night, Sam was scared for the first time. He couldn't sleep for a long time. Waking up in the morning, the boy immediately realized that something terrible had happened. His mother was sobbing in a way that seemed to never stop. He learned from the men next door that his father would never come back. He did not understand then how and for what reason his father could leave them with his mother. She began to wail, saying, "Who did you leave us for? How will we be without you now?" She changed a lot in those days. She didn't make breakfast, didn't scold or smoke her son. It was as if she didn't care what was going on around her. Sam realized that his life had changed dramatically when one of the men at the funeral came up to him and said, "The woods killed your daddy. So hang in there, kid, and take care of your mother now. You are the only man left in the family," he said. Sam stroked his head. That day at the cemetery, the boy did not understand why his father was lying in some box while his mother was sobbing in her voice. He had never seen her like that. His mother was wearing all black, and even her face was somehow alien and gray. Sam did not fully understand what had happened, but looking at his mother, he began to weep himself. My father was buried, but my mother could not calm down for a long time yet. Tears seemed to pour out of her eyes like a torrent for almost 24 hours a day. And Sam, to make her happy somehow, tried to help and pity her in everything. Pity the unhappy widow, and a neighbor began to try. He went to them as if he were at work, standing on the doorstep every morning offering to help. Sam always disliked him. He was always grumbling at the kids playing in the street. "There's no use for your rippers. Oh, I'd give you a beating if I was your father." Back then, all the neighborhood kids were glad they had their own parents who wouldn't let that mean neighbor hurt them. All except Sam. He realized there was no one to stand up for him now. And this insolent neighbor visited his mother almost every other day. Kate didn't kick him out, but she wouldn't let him stay either. Sometime after her father's death, the neighbor came to their house with a bouquet and from the threshold said, "Kate, stop killing yourself. It's been a long time. You'll get it back. Do you need a man in the house? You can't raise a boy without a man's upbringing. You let the boy go. He's gonna be a gangster. And I can teach him how to replace his daddy. And if I have to, I'll get him a belt." He looked menacingly at Sam, but came across the boy's prickly gaze, as if he had come to his senses. He patted him on the head and said in a completely different voice, "I'll give you a hint. Help you fight back. That's not my way. You can't hit a kid, can you?" He winked as if to make Sam happy. But he had realized long ago that if he moved into their home with his mother, peace and quiet would quickly end. The mother, on the other hand, seeing her sons every time and looking at the neighbor when he showed up. She was in no hurry to agree to Kevin's proposal to get back together, and so it went on. The neighbor became a regular visitor to their house. Sam tried, as soon as he showed up, to take a book and leave the house so he wouldn't have to see or hear the bastard. Everything about him was deceitful, unnatural or something. From the first day, the boy disliked the newfound groom and tried in every way to avoid communication with him. But Sam had no time to think about it. He threw all his energies into his studies. The boy understood perfectly well that he could reach his goal only through knowledge and good education. The goal was still to become a businessman. In high school, he was the best student in the school and had already clearly decided where he would enter. Sam was actively preparing for the examinations for one of the best financial and economic academies, which was in the nearest city to them. In addition to studying, he still had time in the morning before and then after class to do all the household chores. By that time, his mother had left only chickens and a pig. True, she bought a black bull, but that did not make her worries any less. And given that my mother went to work in the district center during her shift Saturday, the graduate was back. Now my mother can be sure that she can be calm about the household. And if I also move to you, we'll buy turkeys, pigs, and we'll farm. Sam will make you the head of this farm. You are young, healthy, and only he filled a shot glass and, apparently satisfied with his plan, emptied it in a volley. Sam could not keep silent and tried to reason with the named guest. "I'm not going to do any farming. I'm going to the city and I'm going to continue my studies. A life like yours. No, thank you. And by the way, this isn't a tavern or an inn. Why don't you go and drink your vodka somewhere else and don't go to your mother's anymore? She doesn't want an alcoholic husband." Before Sam knew it, his neighbor jumped up and slapped him. He could have hit back, of course, but I could see his upbringing and common sense took over. The boy had just raised his hand to retaliate, but immediately put it down angrily. What struck him most was not that the neighbor felt he was the boss, but that the mother only covered her mouth with her hands and did not even intercede for her son. Sam rushed into the room and began frantically gathering up his things. His anger overwhelmed him, and to let off steam, he even began to resent out loud. "What is this nonsense? Did you come to our house? No one and no one to call, and he's already got his hands in the air. What's going to happen next? No, that's enough. Let them live as they please. I won't stand for it." He threw away everything he needed with anger, caught his bag, and headed for the exit. His mother noticed that he was already at the door with his things. She came up and, as if apologizing, began to say, "Son, You have to forgive him. It was not him. It was the government vodka in him. Where would you go? Where would you live? Sam felt sorry for my mother, but he had made up his mind long ago to go to the city, and he would have left anyway. Don't worry, I'll be fine. You take care of yourself, and don't let that drunkard get away with it, said the son to his mother and closed the door behind him. At that moment, he not only closed the door of the house, but as if he closed the door to the past. Ahead of Sam awaited a new life, still unknown to him, full of new knowledge and emotions. In the city, he entered the Finance Academy at the first attempt, and in his first year, he was already one of the best students. Teachers couldn't be pleased with him. All his works were shown as an example to the students. His mentor even once said, "What a man is a real financier at heart, and uses not only his knowledge, but also some intuition." Peculiar to him, Sam, however, was like a fish in water in all financial matters. Every test or term paper he wrote was a ready-made business proposal or a good idea for a new project. In his last year, he was sent to a conference where Sam had to make a presentation. The topic was very complicated, but the guy wanted to present the academy in the best light, and for a whole week he didn't sleep at night preparing for the presentation. He tried to cover it in full with a lot of necessary formulas and proofs. The speech went off without a hitch, and after a second pause, there was a standing ovation. Sam was happy to be understood and accepted. And after the performance, one of the members of the jury approached him. The man offered him a job after graduation at his very famous financial company in the city, and Sam promised to think about it. But already at that moment, he decided for himself that he would definitely take it. It was a wonderful prospect to put his knowledge and projects to work, and not just anywhere, but in a major firm. It was something any young professional could only dream of. And he decided to take this chance. Sam graduated from Sam's Academy with honors. Not a single faculty member doubted that. Literally, immediately, after graduation, he went to apply for a job, preliminarily called William and the same member of the jury, offering him the job. From his first day on the job, he found himself in his environment. Numbers, formula diagrams. He was willing to do it around the clock. The guy was literally a generator of new ideas and suggestions. He was immediately noticed by management and began to move up the career ladder very quickly. After getting a job as a specialist in 6 months, he was already the head of the department. The team was in general not bad and rejoiced at the appointment of a new creative chief. But there were enough detractors who whispered behind his back, like William brought in some relative and now promotes. Sam did not pay attention to such gossip. After all, knowledgeable people had seen the results of his work and could appreciate them very much. The first time in the new place was helped by Jo. She was the head of the department that Sam took over 6 months later. Jo was promoted to deputy director and happily handed over all the business in the department to him. She was only 3 years older than Sam, but she had 10 more years of wisdom and knowledge. She loved her job, easily understood all the intricacies which she tried to dedicate Sam to. They, being workaholics, often defended themselves late. And one day, a guy suggested we go out to dinner together. He was very sympathetic to this young, beautiful, and intelligent woman. But he was a country bumpkin, and he did not know how to start a conversation on non-work topics. Everything turned out to be easy and simple all by itself. That evening they sat for a long time in a small cafe near work. Communication turned out to be easy and fun. Jo proved to be a very well-read and interesting person to talk to even outside work. They had much in common. They liked the same time of year and liked movies and books equally. And even in conversation they started saying the same thing several times at the same time. Sam was very easy with Jo. Didn't want to part at all. That evening, after walking her home, he asked her to meet him again the next day for a walk. Jo happily agreed, and the young people started dating. Maybe Sam would even marry the girl. But it was at that time that the chance to become the director of a newly opened branch in another city loomed. His lifelong dream could become more and closer, and he couldn't trade it for everyday life, diapers and skates. That was how he saw family life. And for him, his career was the most important thing right now. Jo had already hinted several times that she wanted a baby, but he tried his best to avoid the subject. As soon as Sam's career issue was resolved, he plucked up the courage to start talking. "Jo, forgive me, for God's sake, but there is no way we can be together right now. I mean, we can still date, but marriage is not for me right now. Don't get me wrong, I've been working towards this goal since I was a kid, and I can't just stop there. You're a smart girl, you know that. Maybe in a few years it will happen. But not today, not now." And Jo listened to her silently, kissed him, and answered quietly, "Sure, I understand you, and I wish you nothing but good luck, my good man." At that moment she was very well kept, and no one knew what was really going on in the soul of this fragile but very strong woman. After that conversation, she tried to think of all sorts of excuses to avoid meeting Sam. One day, he did not meet, and in the morning at work, found out that she had quit. But it was strange because she didn't talk about it. Sam was quiet, and after work he went to her house, and she wasn't there either. Sam went there for days on end until a neighbor told him that Jo had turned in the keys to the rented apartment to the landlady and had left in an unknown direction. For a while he still tried to look for her. But then new responsibilities and daily work consumed him. At first he thought of her often. He missed her very much. But time can erase or muffle all feelings and events. And so it was with Sam. He was so engrossed in his work that even a year later, he seldom thought about his relationship again. Things were going great at the company. When Sam came along, everything ran smoothly and smoothly and smoothly. When vacation time came, he thought it was still worthwhile to take a break and visit his mother. After all, he hadn't been in the village since the conflict with Kevin. Determined to surprise him, he went unannounced. Remembering his mother's taste, he bought a beautiful, bright, languidly colored shawl, a box of her favorite bird's milk, and all sorts of other gastronomic goodies. It was unlikely that such things were brought to the village. By that time, he had a second-hand, but still quite sturdy, presentable car. That's how he set out on his journey. As he approached the village, Sam could not say that he felt anything strongly, but his heart began to beat more frequently. In all these years, their house had not changed much. True, it hadn't changed much. Dilapidated. The roof was clearly in need of repair, and the walls and painting. Sam understood his mother could not cope with it alone, and thought that he had enough to worry about for the vacation. His thoughts were interrupted by some shouting from the house. He hurried and opened the door and saw a terrible picture. Broken plates were lying all over the house. On the table there were bottles with the remains of some kind of murky potion. Completely insane, drunken Kevin swung around his mother, who had gathered in a ball on the bed. Husband came home from work, and she's sick, you see. Marched to the table to set the stuff for her husband. In 1 second, Sam flew over to the troublemaker and grabbed him by his raised arm with all his strength and threw him against the wall. "If you ever raise your hand to your mother again, I'll put you in jail. Now get out of here, you bastard." He didn't seem to fully understand what had happened. He came to the door and grabbed his jacket from the porch. "I'll show you again. I'll put you in jail myself for aggravated assault." My mother pressed herself against Sam and wept bitterly. Then they talked for a long time. Sam talked about himself and Mom about her not. Sweet life. It turned out that she had married that alcoholic in the meantime. And the real nightmare began. He didn't help her with anything. He drank away all the money he made. Sam immediately noticed numerous bruises on her mother's face, and judging by their color, they had been inflicted at different times. It turned out that this scoundrel had also beaten his mother. He was ready to kill the scoundrel, but his mother begged him not to hurt the wretch. At that moment, he felt very sorry for her. He also thought then that his father would never have allowed himself to do such a thing. Sam began to persuade his mother to drop everything and go into town with him. But the woman just cried and said, "No, son, I'm sorry, but this is my home. This is your father's grave. I have a farm, and Kevin is my cross to bear. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to live out my life here. Don't you worry about my life here. Don't you worry about me. I'm used to it." Sam couldn't talk his mother into it, and after a week on leave, he tried to do something for her. Quickly found the laborers who swallowed the roof and repaired the sagging fence. And some other hard laborers had the house perfect. Mom just walked around and wailed, "Oh, my son, it's such a lot of money." "Thank you, my dear. You must have read books for a reason. You've become a great man, and you're helping your mother." He found Kevin and had a sensible talk with him and threatened to take him out of town and put him in jail if he ever laid a hand on his mother again. There was nothing more he could do at the time, but he really hoped that his mother's life would be a little calmer after his departure. He began sending money regularly and calling the post office on the agreed-upon days where she came to talk to her son. She reported that Kevin started drinking only on holidays, got a full-time job, and even helped out around the house occasionally. Sam realized he could not verify this from a distance. All that was left was to take his word for it. Then the post office in the village was closed, and there was no possibility to communicate anymore. But he still sent money, just as he had before. It had been a little over 15 years since then. By that time, Sam had already become a well-known banker in the city with his own bank, even managed to get married. And now, when this hysterical woman made a scandal on the phone, he suddenly had a terrible desire to go to the country, to his secret corner in the barn, or just to cuddle up to his mother and tell her everything. After all, just to enjoy the air of a jobless childhood. In this moment, he suddenly thought that he hadn't been to the village in so many years, and now he wanted to be there until his heart ached. He summoned the secretary, listed almost everything his mother loved, and asked him to procure the necessities for the trip. Within an hour, the bags of gifts and groceries were neatly packed in the car, and Sam was happily on his way. But when he arrived, he was shocked by what he saw. Instead of the once large village with its school, kindergarten, and medical center, he saw completely was in the middle of an abandoned village of ramshackle houses with boarded-up windows. Of all the houses, no more than 10 were still alive, and they were all breathing heavily. Sam drove through the village and remembered how he went every morning to school, which now looked at the world with broken windows and holes. In the holes in the roof of the stores that his mother sent him for bread, there was an even more deplorable condition. All that was left of it was the floor, the ruined walls. Looking at all this, Sam, a grown man, wanted to cry. All his childhood memories were blotted out by what he saw when he drove up to the house. One thing that pleased him was that he hadn't changed much. Since his last visit, Sam got out of the car and almost immediately heard his mother's voice. "Stop fighting. Let's go eat." Sam smiled. He was pleased that his mother hadn't given up on taking care of the animals, though in his heart he thought she had long since gotten rid of that demanding household. Sam walked quietly into the backyard behind the house and watched in silence, with tears in his eyes, as the much-aged mother talked to the chickens running around. As the woman was about to go to the chicken coop, which she had built in the very barn where Sam had once hidden, she saw her son and cried out, Kate nearly falling over, and if her son hadn't picked her up, she definitely would have been on the ground by now. They sat down on the bench at home, and the mother stroked her son on the head, crying and sobbing, saying, "My dear son, how have you grown old? He already has gray hair on his temples. My, you are good. I thought I would see you soon. It's so scary even to die now. No one but my chickens will ever know. Kevin's dead. A couple of years ago, my heart gave out. The green serpent killed him. That's how I live now. Chickens are the only people I talk to." He listened to his mother, and he was very ashamed. After all, he did not even know how she lived here when he sent the money. He had no idea that there was nowhere to spend the money in the middle of nowhere. Mom, though, didn't complain with the wear. Mom, though, didn't complain with some kind of pride, she told him. They don't forget about us. Here, pensions are brought directly to my house. Once a month, a paramedic comes, examines, and brings food twice a week. I have got used to keeping bread in the fridge. There's just enough till they come, if I need threads or seeds for planting. She sells in this shop. Sam stayed up all night. In the morning, he woke up to the smell of pancakes coming from the kitchen. He told his mother, "So, my dear, I don't want to hear any more. I'll give you a day to pack and you're coming with me. There are no human conditions to live in. In town, I'll show you to the best doctors. If you don't want to live with me, you'll live next door. I'll visit you every day. I promise to bring you to my father's grave every year. Driving." My mother didn't even resist. She only timidly asked, "I don't mind, son, but my chickens should be sold." To which Sam, hugging his mother, answered his mother, "Yes, it's just for fun. We'll give them to the neighbors who are close to us." The whole day passed in a bustle and gathering. Mom seemed to have grown young, joyfully packing, running to the neighbors through the houses, giving everything she could. Sam decided to spend one more night in the house before hitting the road in the morning. As a child, he loved to watch the sunrise, sitting on the porch with his cats in a blanket. So this morning he woke up very early and did the same. Sam was admiring the pink and purple streaks on the skyline that was slowly turning golden. When an unfamiliar woman appeared at the gate, she said timidly, "Good morning. Could Kate live in this house?" Sam, hearing the mother's name, nodded affirmatively to the unexpected visitor. Without asking permission, opened the gate, and from somewhere behind her back led the girl. She pushed her into the courtyard and put an old, small suitcase beside her. She said, "Let the mistress take her granddaughter. I can't afford other people's children. I went to her father's office, but they wouldn't let me in. Good thing the secretary was nice. Gave me the address where he was from. So I decided to bring my grandmother's kids. So it's up to you to sort it out. Excuse me, I'm going." She disappeared without waiting for an answer, just as she appeared. At the gate was only a frightened, wearing a shirt girl, 12, 13 years old, afraid to even lift his eyes. When Sam came to his senses, he rushed after the stranger and begged her to come back and tell him everything. They sat in the kitchen for about an hour, and Ross, the woman's name said that Liz was the daughter of Joe, her niece. When she came to her from the city, with a belly full, she was not very happy about it, but she felt sorry for her and accepted it. And then she learned that the father of the child, between her and his career, chose the latter. So she ran away from him, not to interfere with him. The throne was no great joy to me, but not to expose my pregnant niece to the street, continued Ross's story. In my heart, I hoped that my father would come to his senses, would show up. But as the years went by, nothing changed. Nothing would have changed. But recently, Joe was diagnosed with an incurable disease. Yeah, too late. Burned out like a candle. So I decided to give the baby to the next of kin. The daddy, turns out the first place she went was the banker's office. The dying niece told me who Liz's father was and where to find him. But having made a scandal from the doorstep, she was quickly put out on the street by security after receiving the address from the kind-hearted secretary. She decided to take the girl to the village to his parents, more precisely the mother. Ross, having told everything, said goodbye and left. And Sam and his mother, trying to comprehend what had happened, began to get ready for the road. Liz sat silently on the corner of the bed all morning, looking at them frightened. Kate was already frightened. Had the girl been born mute? Which is what she asked the child about, but Liz answered quietly, "No, I can talk, but I don't want to. I'm afraid of you." At which the new grandmother sat down and hugged Liz and kissed her on the top of her head. The woman said affectionately, "Well, can we do anything bad to you?" After all, Sam, your daddy, and I am the real native grandmother. Now we are your family, and we will not let anyone hurt you. Now they will not let anyone hurt you. Now let's go. I'll feed you some pancakes for the road. When Sam brought his big house in the countryside, my mother, getting out of the car, began to press her hands to her heart, wailing, "Oh my goodness, my son, are you alone in such a house? Do not you live? It takes a long time to wash and clean it, and you do all this yourself. You work." He hugged Mom and, smiling, began to calm Mom. "Don't worry, neither you nor I are going to clean this house. My housekeeper comes to me. Several times a week she cleans. So you girls, the main thing is not to make too much of a mess. And there is someone to make order." He laughed and invited Liz and her mother into the house. The girl was afraid to even get out of the car for the first minute, but having made friends with her grandmother on the way, she agreed to her invitation only. The woman took her granddaughter by the hand and said quietly, "Well, let's go. Let's see where we have to live. Do not be afraid. I myself in such a mansion has never been in all my life. We'll settle in together." Mama went from room to room in the house and mumbled, "Well, Sam, you read books for a reason. Half of our village could fit in such a house." The house was really big and bright. On the first floor there was a living room with a beautiful fireplace in the corner and a huge oak table in the middle. The kitchen was a little to the side, and there was a sea of all kinds of appliances and beautiful dishes. On the second floor of the bedrooms is Sam's study and 4 guest rooms, 2 of which he offered the choice to occupy for his mother and daughter. Liz stood silently, didn't even budge after Sam's suggestion. Then Kate, trying to smooth over the awkward situation, took her hand and suggested, "And let's go with you to choose together." They opened one door after another, eventually choosing the 2 small rooms next door. Each had a spacious bed and a closet, and a table with a mirror. Sam appreciated their choice and said, "I think just at Liz's we'll do a little rearranging. After all, no one has canceled school, so we'll need a desk for lessons and a shelf for books." Sam did his best to make mother and daughter feel at home, gradually began to accustom them to the good life. In the first few days, he took them both out on a grand shopping spree. And, despite their mother's lamentations that there was no need, and that everything was expensive, he completely renewed their closet. Kate, seeing herself in the mirror, in a strict, elegant suit, burst into tears. "Look at that. What a beauty. Thank you, my son. I even feel as if I'm 10 years younger," she said in a trembling voice, and kissed her son. To which Sam, smiling, replied, "It's going to be a long time. We now go to the best beauty salons. You'll come out of there queens for sure." Liz he had to fail. At least through this he tried to find an approach to his daughter. After all, she is still only thank you and hello, from which he was trying to wean her. Did not say anything to him. But with her grandmother, they became just real friends. Sam had to, if he wanted to ask something or ask his daughter. I had to involve my mother. After buying everything they needed for school besides the outfit, they were on their way to the car when Sam was called by a familiar voice. Sam, wow, what a meeting. Who is so lucky? There are so many, I have so many. Not buying. The man tried to walk through without stopping. He didn't want to talk to his ex-girlfriend at all, especially not in that tone of voice. But the insolent person blocked their way and spoke in a single voice. "Sam, why don't you introduce me to your companions? As far as I know, I'm your wife yet." Sam did not have time to think about it, as my mother in simplicity already held out her hand and said, "Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm Kate's mom, and this is his daughter Liz. Son, why didn't you tell me you were married?" He looked at his ex-girlfriend angrily and almost hissed, "Get out of my way without forcing me to use force. You'll get the divorce papers in a few days from my lawyer." Turning to his companions, he said in a completely different, calm tone, "Well, my beauties, let's go home. Don't pay too much attention to it." She's not worth it. When they returned, Kelly's assistant had not left. And when she saw Kate and Liz arrive, she spluttered her hands enthusiastically saying this, "What beauties you are, Kate, Liz. You are unrecognizable. You're quite the ladies of the world now." Sam's mother, smiling happily, even twirled around, showing herself from all sides. And Liz was embarrassed and blushed profusely. Her grandmother immediately took her hand. "Come on, honey, this outfit suits you very well. You and I now have to get used to walking such a beauty." Liz was accepted into a fee-paying gymnasium, where each class was only 5 or 6 people, and the children were clearly not from simple families. Every morning Sam drove her to class, and in the evening he would either pick her up himself or send a security guard. The girl was withdrawn, but she was an excellent student from day one. Sam was proud of that and even told her mother once, "Liz was like me. She wouldn't let the books out of her hands. I showed her where my library was, and she wouldn't come out of there." Life in the house went on in a measured way. Kate was always finding something to do, baking pies now and then with mushrooms, now with berries in the nearby woods. Liz was studying. Sam was gone all day at work. A couple of months after he moved his daughter and mother in, things took a turn for the worse. Sam had to stay late at work that day. The next day was a serious debriefing meeting for Liz. He asked the security guard to drive over. He had already picked her up several times outside the school and taken her home. The girl would go out to the gate after class and wait. It was inconvenient and a long way to get there on her own. The phone rang. It seemed to Sam something alarming. It was the security guard. "Boss, your daughter is nowhere to be found." I waited. Then I went to the school. They said a man had taken her, and her classmates heard him say he was her father's assistant. "You mean you? I've already checked through my channels. It turned out to be a former security guard that you fired a few months ago. I'll text you his info now, and I'm on my way to the office." Sam just hung up. Another call came in. The number turned out to be unknown. On picking it up, he was surprised. Linda called and immediately started yelling, "Well, honey, now I'm going to have to do the right thing. I've got your little chicken. And until you bring me $5 million, and I will not let her go. If she doesn't, you'll get her in installments, or you'll find her at the bottom of our deepest river. That's your choice." She laughed so unpleasantly into the receiver at this point that Sam realized she could do anything. "I'll be waiting for the money in an hour at the abandoned house on the outskirts that you once showed me, and also said that you would buy this plot for me and build a store. Dreams must come true. Here you are, so to speak, buying it. By the way, don't think about coming with guards or cops. I have a protector with a gun. You probably remember Nicole. He's my boyfriend now, so to speak. He's very angry with you and he's armed. At least give me a couple of hours," Sam tried to haggle. "Hopefully in that time to figure out how to work things out. Not that my daughter." But the ex was relentless and shouted into the tube, "Hour and not a minute more." Sam immediately summoned the head of security of the bank and quickly told him what had happened half an hour later. Sam was on his way to the specified address, and about the rest he knew that he could not worry. If it took in his hands his reserve, who had a lot of combat experience in hot spots, Sam could be calm. And the head of security only asked him to pull at least 5 minutes on the spot. When he arrived, he saw his daughter with her eyes closed and tied to some dirty wood in the middle of the floor of a collapsed house. He immediately rushed to her. "Liz, daughter, what have they done to you?" Out of the darkness from next door came Linda and Nicole, holding a gun at the ready. "Nothing happened to your princess. She just started screaming in the car. Had to give her a sleeping pill. You got the money?" Sam nodded affirmatively, and remembering the chief of security's request, began to stall, said, "Linda, you fool. Do you realize what you are doing? You'll be caught anyway, and you'll both do time here for half a lifetime of incarceration. But the woman, with overthrown anger in her eyes, replied, "Shut up. We have thought of everything in detail. In about half an hour we'll be waving to you from the plane leaving for a long and happy life. Now you get your phone and car keys and give them to me. Nicole and I will go out quietly and you save your princess. Looks like we sedated her a little too much. She should see a doctor." She smirked and took the bag of money and everything she asked for, and they headed for the exit. By that time, Sam had managed to see through the broken window. The shadow of a man in uniform flashed and realized that he had managed to report to the right place and the couple were already waiting outside. He immediately untied his daughter, grabbed her in his arms, and carried her to the car. Luckily, the hospital was only a few kilometers away and the baby was soon under medical supervision. Sam sat by his daughter's bedside for several hours and was very happy when she opened her eyes in a weak voice and said, "Daddy, it's so good to have you by my side. I was so frightened when they tied me up. I thought they wanted to kill me. You saved me. Thank you. You're the best daddy ever." Sam, not trying to hold back tears of joy, hugged his daughter and whispered in her ear, "And you are the most beautiful, kind, and intelligent daughter in the world." Then the doctor entered the room and immediately became indignant. "What kind of sentimental scene is this? Get out of the room at once. The patient needs rest." Sam kissed his daughter and left, promising to come back soon. He did begin to visit his daughter several times a day and brought something delicious each time. When, once again, he made her bed and carefully peeled an orange, the attending physician appeared again. Right from the threshold, she began to reprimand her sternly. Sam liked boys. "Do you ever come to the hospital on time? It's quiet time in 5 minutes, and here you are peeling oranges. And stop carrying bags of food in here. We're actually eating okay. No one's complained yet. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room." Sam couldn't take it anymore and got up from his chair and shouted in indignation, "What kind of woman are you? Everything is not right. I come at the wrong time and bring the wrong thing. You should not work with people, but with robots. And anyway, it's still 5 minutes until bedtime, so I'll spend them with my daughter." The reaction that followed his speech he never expected. The doctor cried and ran out of the room. It was only then that Sam realized he had overreacted. He shouldn't have spoken to her like that. The man decided immediately to apologize and went to the resident's room. He stood in front of the door at a loss for a couple of seconds. But then he knocked anyway. There was no answer. He decided to go in after all. The doctor was standing at the window and her shoulders were shaking. It was obvious that the woman was crying. "Pardon me, for God's sake. I do not know what came over me," began Sam, not daring to approach. She turned to face him and said softly, "Yes, I am sorry. I just graduated from the institute and came here straight away. I thought the stricter I was with the patients, the more they would treat me with respect. I just can't seem to do it." Sam just now noticed that she really is very young, without a medical cap and glasses. She turned out to be very young. Lucy, that was the doctor's name, offered tea. As long as there were no new patients, they talked for a long time, and Sam was easy with this girl. She turned out to be very cheerful, direct, and every time she laughed at Sam's jokes. They parted that day as people who had known each other for a long time. Now, every time he came to visit his daughter, Sam was sure to look into the resident's room and leave a beautiful bouquet. A few days before Liz's discharge, he asked Lucy to meet him in the evening at a restaurant, and the girl did not refuse. After a beautiful evening, they took a long walk through the autumnal streets, and Sam realized that he did not want to part with her at all. But at the same time, he did not even think about marriage. He remembered how Robert had tried to be his father, and what had come of it. Sam didn't want his newly minted relationship with his daughter to be tainted by his stepmother. No, Lucy, of course, was a wonderful, kind girl, but he absolutely did not want to change the relationship with his daughter and experience the horror of family life, as with Linda. so he tried not to think about the subject of marriage. They just kept dating and didn't bring up the future. Lucy visited Sam several times. They immediately found common ground with his mother as well as with Liz. A couple of times they went on picnics together to the nearest lake. And Sam, watching from the side the three women close to him, was a real pleasure. On one of these trips, the daughter, tearing herself away from another game with Lucy, came up and cuddled up to her father. "Daddy, Lucy is so good. I really want her to be my mother. You're going to get married someday anyway. Let's marry her. She's very kind and loves ice cream like I do. Cream brulee, promise me you'll get married. And Lucy and I will wear white dresses." Sam, smiling, stroked his daughter on the head and said, Well, as long as you're doing well, I'm ready to marry her. You know, baby, it's just that when my mom brought in the new daddy, we were ready to kill each other. And I was really afraid that you wouldn't be able to accept her. So did you? I seem to have been in love with her for a long time." He winked at his daughter and kissed her, whispering, "I can't tonight. I do not have the necessary ritual, a ring. And tomorrow I vow to propose in front of you and Grandma, inviting you to dinner." Liz laughed and whispered like conspirators, "Dad, how old-fashioned you are." "I just from the first day as you're still there in the ward had a fight," I realized. "You guys are so cool. I couldn't even dream that I would have so many relatives at once. We'll show up. Now I have a daddy and a grandmother. And I beg you very much for Lucy's mother." A month later, a very modest, no dresses from Milan wedding was scheduled. It could even be called a simple marriage registration. If it weren't for Alex, the holiday lover, he was the first to suggest a banquet for the occasion. And surprisingly, Sam showed up with his family, modestly, without pathos, marking the event, the newlyweds in due time to please the local gossip girls strolling with the stroller, where the two twins were cute asleep. No one else cared, boys or girls. Everyone was sure that this family would be difficult to separate or destroy. The happiest person was Kate, a 3-time grandmother who never tired of taking care of her grandchildren.